Senator Marlon Kimpson is never at a loss of words. And in this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with him one-on-one. Senator Kimpson, the last time I saw you was June 4th. I was actually at the South Carolina State House, and, I was taking in the views, and actually ran into you as I was going up to the Senate and House chambers. And that was the last time I actually saw you. Tell me, how are you?
I'm doing great, Quintin, and thank you for having me.
Anytime.
You have a knack for identifying the issues in the community, and you're always well researched.
Yes, sir.
Like a good journalist.
I do my best.
So I'll try to do the best and answer any questions you have.
Sure.
It's good to be with you.
Likewise, always.
All right.
And a few days after June 4th, we experienced the unspeakable here in Charleston. As you know, 9 people of God were murdered inside Mother Emanuel during Bible study on Wednesday, June 17th. We know the details about the unfortunate massacre. And, when I first heard about it, I thought it was inaccurate information. But obviously, as time went on, we knew that that was a real issue there. I'm wondering this. Where were you when you got the news? And when you got the news, what did you tell yourself?
Well, we were in session, and I got a call. I was in Columbia. It was, I guess, around 9:30.
Right.
And I got a call from Elliott Summey, the chairman of Charleston County Council, and he indicated that I need to get to back home.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm getting ready, prepared for the next day in session and getting ready for bed. And I started to inquire as to why, and he said, we got at least 8 deaths in your Senate district. And I said, that sounds pretty serious. Can you tell me any more information? And he indicated that it was at Mother Emanuel Church. And of course, my immediate reaction was not only the concern for the 7 deaths, but or the 8 deaths that he indicated, but whether one of them was my colleague and friend, Senator Pinckney, and he did not have that information at the time. And so I called my wife to check on her and make sure the family was okay, and packed my bags and headed back to Charleston. And so we got back here. He asked me to come to the 911 center. And the thought was, and this is interesting because not many people know this,
Okay.
there were a number of elected officials downtown.
Oh, yeah.
And apparently, somewhere in the chaos, someone called in a bomb threat.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And so the concern was that if there was indeed a bomb threat, then all of the elected officials are downtown. So there was no need to send any more elected officials because, if something were to happen, there would need some leadership in the city.
Sure.
And so he was reaching out, he being Summey,
Right.
to find out who wasn't downtown, and we were being asked to come to the 9/11 center. And when I got to the 9/11 center, all of the calls were coming in there, and so I had an opportunity to find loyal employees of the county. There were city police, North Charleston, FBI, SLED. It was a real command center, separate and distinct from the command center downtown. And so we stayed there, and information begun to come in, and we were analyzing data and checking on folks, and the facts kept coming in, and the night evolved, and ultimately I made it to the command center downtown. The coast was clear with respect to bombs. And then I ended up leaving the command center, and this is probably now 2 o'clock in the morning, approaching 3 o'clock, I went to the embassy suites to greet some of the families and let them know, express my condolences. And by that time, of course, I heard that Senator Pinckney was no longer living.
And you told a media outlet this quote: "He was a giant, a legend, a moral compass." Tell me, how did this giant, this legend, and this moral compass help you professionally and politically?
Well, that's the first thing I said about him. He was the moral compass of the General Assembly. When we would be negotiating key pieces of legislation, for example, the body camera bill,
right.
That's just one of them.
Right.
But there were so many other pieces that we'd reach an impasse on.
Sure.
And we always yielded to Senator Pinckney to give us wise counsel and advice. And, you know, most times, the majority of times, he wasn't partisan. Okay. It wasn't a Democratic or Republican issue. It was what's right, what's morally right.
Yeah.
He really led by example. He wanted to help people. What's right for the citizen. Yeah. And so he would often give us lectures and talk to us and quote scripture. Yeah. But he had a real unique way of communicating. And he could have used that voice to do so many other things.
Oh, that's what everyone was saying.
So many others. He was very gifted, intelligent, smart, quick on his feet. He decided to enter politics and be a public servant. Yeah. And I think that epitomizes his attitude and made him who he was.
Yeah. And next week, Wednesday, will be 2 months since the tragedy of Mother Emanuel. It took for me to watch a YouTube clip of the 9 folks sitting inside the Bible study at that time on Snapchat, that is, to really realize that something that tragic happened here. I'm wondering, where are you emotionally almost 2 months later?
Well, it's been a very emotional time. I can tell you this. I attended I attended every funeral and or wake, right, of the Emanuel 9, and I learned a lot about those individuals. Yeah. I knew many members of the church and had frequented the church, right, particularly as I was campaigning, and Senator Pinckney always welcomed me, right, but didn't have a close relationship other than Senator Pinckney with the 8. Yeah. Now, subsequently, I learned that I knew many of the families, yeah. Yeah. Extended families. One of my good friends from law school had a sister perish, and so, not law school, but undergrad school. And then we've met so many good people, the Susie Jackson family, right, and the Myra Thompson family. Right. They I hosted them as we watched the Confederate flag being lowered. But we're now focused on a legislative response, a substantive response. As you walked in, I got 5 bills on my desk that I'm editing. Wow. And you will hear about those later. I'm not prepared. I'm still studying. Sure. I'm not prepared to announce what those are, but the people of District 42 should know that I did not take this matter lightly. I heard what the community said through so many community forums, and we got to be focused on a substantive agenda coming out of this tragedy so that we can really address the issues that polarize our community and finally come to grips with the division that prevents us from doing so many big things in the state of South Carolina. I'm focused on big things, and so you'll be seeing some of that this legislative year. Now we did some stuff. Yes. Last legislative year. Everybody talks about body cameras and the Confederate flag, but things we did was we passed a substantive expungement bill for juveniles.
Right.
Are we going to talk about that?
Sure.
Or do you want me to talk about that?
You can go ahead right now.
Okay.
Please.
Essentially, in fact, if you want to hand me that poster right there, this is what you call, this is the, I was on I'll just show this one time to your viewers.
Sure.
But this is what you call the school to prison pipeline.
Okay.
And they can't see it, but we have identified that we have a problem. And the problem is, now we support student resource officers.
Sure, sure.
That was really done in the aftermath of 9/11. And so they have a tough job.
Yeah.
But what we got to be concerned about is these children who are getting records with law enforcement for doing things that we did in grade school, where we were penalized by missing recess or being suspended from school.
Right.
I was never suspended, I'm sure you
No.
were either. But maybe missing some extracurricular activity. But now this zero tolerance policy in the wake of 9/11 has students have greater interaction with law enforcement. And so it's not to prohibit law enforcement from doing their job, but we have to look at where our children are headed after high school. And if they have a record that they developed as a juvenile, this bill will, assuming the record reflects a nonviolent offense, that's important, then this bill, that's now law, that was signed by the governor,
Right.
will allow the student, without hiring a lawyer, that's the key, because what has happened, we've always had expungement.
Sure.
But you had to hire a lawyer to go through the petition to court.
Right.
Well, this bill, simple form, the offense falls in one of several categories. They file a form with the solicitor's office, and the judge must grant the expungement. That's big. That's a big thing, and I look forward to talking more about it. League of Women Voters,
Oh, yes.
South Carolina Teachers Association, the Links, all of the groups. We had seminars on this last year. We got a bill, and we did it. It's signed into law. The other thing that a lot of people have not talked about, and it didn't get the visibility.
Okay.
I had a constituent named Cora Connor. Her brother is named Herman. He was diagnosed with renal medullary carcinoma. And that is a rare, very rare form of cancer that's associated with the sickle cell trait.
Oh.
And so what we find in the state of South Carolina is that sickle cell is largely a disease that impacts people of color.
Sure.
And people from Central and South America and the Hispanic community. Those are just the facts. And but a lot of people do not have the sickle cell awareness piece. And in order to really tackle a disease, we first have to identify what that disease or condition is,
Sure.
and then research it to determine whether or not, with counseling and with medical treatment, how we can improve the condition of the individual, or how we can rid the system. In this case, you can't rid yourself of the trait, but we can at least identify all the illnesses associated. So I filed a bill, the Sickle Cell Awareness Bill, because of Ms. Cora Connor.
Right.
And now every hospital and birth center will, anyone who's been identified with the sickle cell trait at birth will get the appropriate consultation through organizations like COBRA, headed by Bill Saunders and David Mack, and then the James R. Clark Foundation in Columbia. And then the next step, which I plan to do upcoming session, starting in December.
Right.
Starting in January, is we got now to work on the funding piece.
Sure.
Because they need resources to do their work in the community. And so those are two bills. We got several others. I won't take up too much more time, but we got some substantive things done beyond the body camera bill, which was big. As you know, before the shooting of Walter Scott.
Right.
I was assigned to a subcommittee on S-47, and we had 3 hearings prior to the shooting of Walter Scott. So we knew there was an issue, and that started with the shooting of LeVar Jones in Richland County, who was pulled over for a seatbelt violation, and when he was going to get his wallet, he got shot.
Right.
The highway patrolman emptied his service weapon, while the unarmed African-American male was attempting to comply with the officer's command.
Oh, yeah.
And so that flashed across in so many of us. And I got to give it to Representative Wendell Gilliard. He was talking about body cameras long before many of us. Now, body cameras were in place in some parts of the state, but Representative Gilliard had vision on that piece. But we filed a bill in the Senate, and we started moving that bill before the shooting of Walter Scott. And we were building coalitions, particularly with the law enforcement community, because we had to get a bill passed. But at the beginning of those hearings, there were not many citizens participated, which is disappointing. I post to my Facebook when I have legislation. I want people to know we want to hear from them.
Sure.
And it's very important that your listeners know that anytime there's a subcommittee meeting and you're interested in the subject, you need to come to Columbia so you can testify.
Sure.
Now, at the final body camera hearing, where we passed unanimously to move on to the full judiciary, to the Senate floor, we got some area folks here, including Reverend Nelson Rivers,
Right.
To testify, and he's always eloquent,
Absolutely.
very on point. And many others weighed in, Joe Darby and Dot Scott. But we got the bill passed in the Senate and went on to the House, and that's a blueprint. That vote is a blueprint for what we can do next year, because super majorities in both. So body camera was important. Confederate flag, I was a co-sponsor of the Confederate flag bill. Vincent Shaheen, of course, he called for the Confederate flag well before the Charleston massacre.
Sure.
He called for it. He didn't win governor, but he had already had the bill. We talked over the weekends preceding the vote to figure out how to successfully navigate it. One of the key pieces was the business community. But the point that people should know is that we all work together. The Republicans and the Democrats in both the House and Senate. And again, the Charleston delegation, the House delegation, they did their job. And all of them are to be applauded. They showed leadership. Then they had a tougher fight than we did in the Senate.
Right.
But I gotta give my colleagues in the Charleston delegation and the Senate side a lot of credit too, because they went to the floor, especially Paul Thurman.
Oh, yeah.
Went to the floor, and procedurally there were some amendments, not as many in the House, but procedurally Paul Thurman moved to table every amendment that was offered to dilute the bill, except one. Somebody else, I think the chairman, Larry Martin, moved. But all of this was recorded on ETV. I post most of this on my Facebook page. But the bottom line is, look, we're engaged and focused in the work of the legislature. There's a lot of work. You got to be focused.
Yes.
And you got to work hard, roll up your sleeves. You got a lot of other stuff going. I got a full-time job. But this work is very important. I'm glad that the people have confidence in me.
Yeah, and you, speaking of the Confederate flag, you actually said this, quote, "This is our moment."
Yeah.
I'm curious, what was that moment like when the Senate actually voted to remove the Confederate flag from the State House grounds?
Oh, it was a big moment. I think the vote was 37 yays and 3. It may have been three nays, and we 46 of us.
Right.
Some people were out of town.
Oh, okay.
But it was a big moment. But we had done the work
Yes.
beforehand, so I expected a good vote. But on third reading, we needed 2/3. We didn't have to have. This is contrary to what most people think. We didn't have to have 2/3 on the second reading. But on the third reading, both readings, we got super majorities, 2/3. But we had done the work, so I expected a good vote. When it went to the House, of course, they went through their process. I watched all of it, and I was proud of our Charleston delegation again. They really held forth. But we're a deliberative body, and whether I agree with some of the amendments that were being offered, that's for the district of those respective representatives to decide. Personally, I thought some of it was frivolous.
Okay.
But those folks will be up for re-election next year. So their district electorate will have to decide whether to send them back.
The Emmanuel Amy shooter, who doesn't deserve any mention right now, but you said this to the Huffington Post, that he is a thug and should receive the death penalty. Almost 2 months later after the tragedy, I know the family has forgiven him. Have you?
Well, it's really for the family. I don't think I'm in a position, to opine on that. The family forgives him, and that's what counts. The death penalty is a very serious penalty. It's the ultimate penalty, and that process will play out. And I've encouraged both the solicitor and the U.S. attorney, who both met with me several times. I applaud Scarlett, the work she's doing with getting the indictment. Many people said, well, they had all the evidence, but in this nation, you can't be sure that you're gonna get an indictment.
Right.
Same with Slacker.
Right.
People say, well, but look, the process is unfolding. She's doing her job. And so I want to give her a chance to do her job, and I can understand why people have different feelings about that. But with these two cases, at least justice seems to be working.
Okay.
We're going to have a trial, so there'll be a trial.
Sure.
Well, we expect a trial. It depends on how they plead.
Okay.
But the families, I've encouraged both of them to talk to the families about the death penalty, and the families, they need to be heard on that. And ultimately, it's the Attorney General, who Nettles works for,
right.
The Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney General, and then Scarlett can make her own decision whether to pursue the death penalty. But if there's ever a case that's appropriate for the death penalty, then the Dylan Roof case is one.
Yeah. Unity. As you know, a lot of people walked over the bridge here during the time of the tragedy. We had fundraisers, we had prayer vigils. I'm wondering, what does that unity tell you?
Well, it's a roadmap. I spoke at outside of the 15,000 people that were right here.
Right on the bridge. Yeah.
I spoke at the city-sponsored prayer vigil, and there were probably 4,000 or 5,000 people in there. In fact, I got a picture of it somewhere.
Okay.
But look, Charleston has shown the nation how to come together. And this is a roadmap for us, legislators, elected officials, to tap into this energy of unity to move forward with some substance. I was so proud. I'm so proud. Now, I'm from Columbia, but the folks in Charleston have welcomed me, and
Not been ya.
Not been ya. But I feel like I've been ya, because the people have come together, particularly in times of controversy. So what we got to do is turn the moment into a movement, and move with legislation.
Okay.
Substantive legislation.
I want to switch gears and talk about Stephanie Ganaway Paisley. Mm-hmm. She was really a 13-year-old, 13 veteran of the Charleston County Magistrate. She was informed that she would be replaced after political appointments, that is. And she told the Post and Courier that it was a surprise to her and a disappointment. And you said to the Post and Courier, there's no entitlement to this position. Tell me then, what is?
What is what?
If there's no entitlement, what is?
Well, there's no entitlement to a position that's appointed. Magistrates have terms.
Yeah.
As you know, the Senate delegation makes the appointment.
Sure.
Unfortunately, there was not much support, including from me, of Miss Ganaway's, Paisley's reappointment. I met with all of the magistrates
Sure.
and evaluated them, and including people who have never had a chance to apply for the job, like you would do any other
Sure.
job applicant.
Right.
This is an appointment, but it is a job.
Right.
And I chose, or I supported the people who I thought would do the best job. That's not to say she wasn't a fine person and judge. People have their varying opinions, but when I met with all of the individuals involved, and I think there were about, there were at least more than 5 new people who expressed an interest. More than that. Met with all of them.
Yeah.
And I agreed to support the ones who I thought were the best. And out of that, out of that whole process, there are 3 new African American judges. And I think, now you can check me on this, we have never had the number of African Americans on the bench in Charleston County in the magistrates positions that we have now, and that's progress. And these individuals have the ability to move up because they are trained. They went to law school.
Sure.
They are trained to move forward. Now that's not a requirement, but the point is that we need to really, when we have all appointments,
Sure.
we need to take politics out. None of these individuals supported me.
Oh.
I can't tell you how they voted, but I can tell you that none of them made any contributions to me. But we take the politics out and look at people qualified.
Okay.
And these African Americans, Martell Morrison, Idris Jenkins,
Right.
Dina Richardine Singleton
That's
Brown,
right.
first class, all of their swearing-in ceremonies packed,
Oh, yeah.
full of people in North Charleston. The citizens feel like they truly have someone with these new appointments that represent them. I know with Richard Dean's, the Delta Sigma Theta sorority turned out in big numbers, and both Royal Baptist Church, because they got 2 magistrates
Right,
now
yeah.
who are church members, and so we worked on the process. Nobody, and I've told all of the magistrates, because it wasn't just them. There were
Right.
2 other new magistrates
Sure,
as
sure.
well. Look, we're watching them. It's our obligation to watch who we appoint.
Sure.
And if they don't do a good job, they should not get comfortable in those positions, because we'll remove them. But it's a Senate delegation appointments, meaning I don't have the power on my own
Right.
to put anybody. So you don't want to nominate someone who can't get elected. You want to use that opportunity to nominate someone who all the senators can vote for and support.
And so, to all these people who really don't know how the process goes, because we've heard the controversy out there, what do you say to them?
Well, the statute is pretty clear, and I think that people are very pleased. I've heard good comments about
Okay.
the magistrates we appointed.
Okay.
I don't think there's much controversy. It started out now with a few people
Oh, yeah.
calling me, and I can understand. Listen, we make tough decisions in these jobs, but I can tell you this: I'm gonna make the right decision, and I'm not afraid to be challenged on things, because I should have the responsibility and obligation to defend my decisions.
Sure.
And I'm very comfortable with the decisions to support the magistrates we supported in the last election. Now, they got 4 years, and I've already gotten calls
Wow.
from people who are interested in being a magistrate. So if you got followers out there or viewers who are interested, the process is you call the senator, you come talk to him, and they'll interview you. And in 4 years from now, you might just be, if you're qualified and worthy of having the title, you just might be a magistrate, particularly if some of the existing ones don't do a good job. So we created more African American magistrates by the last election.
Quickly describe to me the following in one word: public transit,
A priority,
clean energy,
necessary,
your future.
bright.
Well, Senator Marlon Kimpson, thank you so much for your time as always.
Good seeing you.
Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate that.